Okay, I think I know who stabbed Jarl in the head. You know, the really old giant at the end of the last chapter. It's like the chief of the village. Probably the closest thing to like a sovereign of Elbaf right now. We're not really sure because we don't know how many villages are on the Sun Lair. Dory said there's quite a few. The castle is in this village, the Western Village. We still don't know the name of the village, but we know it's Oust Castle in the Western Village is where King Harald had his reign. Okay, so, I'm not really sure about that, if each village has their elder that basically just rules over that particular area or something. Maybe there's a council of elders. I'm not sure. But we know Jarl, because he showed up during Big Mom's flashback with Jorl and Lord Mountainbeard and Lord Fallbeard, respectively. And now we see him here, 63 some years later. He is 408 years old and is clarified as the oldest giant in the world. Okay? Now, I want to ask all of you a very serious question. Who do you know that has a propensity for killing old people? That upon realizing that the oldest person to ever exist is walking on this planet, I think we know the culprit. I think we know who did it. I think it's William. Yeah, William. Dude, this is the perfect time, Oda. This is the perfect time to make my One Piece D&D character a canon character in One Piece. If you want to incorporate William into One Piece, Oda, you have my blessing, okay? Ah, yes. I can see it now. William, member of the Revolutionary Army, kind of a freelancer, kind of a mercenary, you know? One day he hears that the oldest man in the world still walks. His heart still beats. And William, he leaves in the middle of the night because he knows what he has to do. And then somehow some crazy shenanigans happened, and he ended up stabbing Jarl in the head. And he didn't die. He's still around. Okay. So a couple of things here, all right? I'm really glad, and I brought this up in the review. I was a little bit hesitant at first, because when they mentioned Jarl was still alive, I think the first time we heard about him was after the whole incident with Road in the Diorama City. Gerd said, like, oh, we're going to report Road to Elder Jarl, and he's going to be really upset with you, right? Okay, so it's like that confirmed he's still alive. So I was like, oh, I don't know, man, because, like, the big deal about Jorl and Jarl was they were like 350 some years old, or like 340 some years old back during Big Mom's flashback, okay? And that was like 60 some years ago. And it was mentioned over and over again that giants lived to around 300. Like, that's their general age range, okay? So already, like, you know, Jorl and Jarl were like compared to human ages, they would have been like centurions at that point. Like, if you do the thing where you divide their age by 3 to get like a relative human age, they'd already be around like 115 years old, like back then. And it's like, okay, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, there's people that live that long now. They're not very commonplace, but they're around. But now it's like 60 years later, and he's 408 years old, or 408 years young, maybe he would say. And it's like, wow, okay, that's really, really old. But dude, the opportunities that this opens up in the story are immense. First of all, the fact that Oda just clarifies in his introductory box, no, this is the oldest giant in the world. Okay, no one is older than him. Probably no one even comes as close to him. All right, he is probably, Jarl is sort of an anomaly that no other giant really reaches this kind of advanced age. Like, that's 136 years old. You know, it's funny, compared out to human ages, that's still younger than Kureha, so there you go. Maybe someone performed the immortal surgery operation on Jarl. No, I don't think that's works on Jarl. Although with Kureha, though, I think the jury is still out on that one. So yeah, Jarl is the oldest giant in the world. Here is a list of some of the things that he would have lived through. So we're going to go like earliest to further back, okay? So about 200 years ago in the One Piece story, that was when Fishman Island entered into an alliance with the world government, and fishmen at large were no longer considered just animals. There's still a lot of prejudice against them. Slavery is still prevalent in the story, but that was when Fishman Island began an alliance with the world government, all right? That was around 200 years ago. Jarl would have been in his prime. Maybe not even in his prime. He would have been in like maybe his 70s or something. 208. What's 208 divided by 3? Hold on, I have a calculator. I brought a calculator to this video. Yeah, that would have been around 70. He would have been around 69. Nice. So yeah, that was like, relative human age. All right, he would have still been in his fighting, shape at that point, right? So that was 200 years ago. It was also the same time around that moment when Emmett, the Iron Giant, scaled the Red Line and attacked Marijois. Provided Jarl does not have dementia, which it seems like in the last chapter he seems pretty lucid. When Luffy is like, oh my god, Gramps, you got a sword in your head. And Jarl's like, oh, this old thing? Yeah, it was an old wound. Good thing I was wearing my helmet. I could have died. But the sword is going right through the helmet to the other side of the head, so that's why it's funny. We'll get to the sword in a moment, exactly what the story is with that. I'll talk about it, right? I'm not really sure. But yeah, so provided he's not like, what? Memories, huh? What? Yeah, Jarl? Yeah, I remember Jarl. I don't remember what happened to Jarl. Whatever. That would actually be really sad if he just had, like, no memory of his best friend. So, no, he seems to be pretty coherent, okay? So that would have been something he would have lived through, and maybe he would have had memories of that. Like, oh, yeah, 200 years ago. I remember what was going on 200 years ago, because the world government does a really good job of, like, 1984ing this crap. They have a really good job of, like, or I guess Fahrenheit 451 is more about burning the books and everything like that. But that's the kind of idea, right? Wiping out history, scrubbing it, squeaky clean, so it makes the world government look great. There's probably like a lot of stuff about 200 years ago that like no one is alive. Even Kureha hasn't lived that long, right? So, there's like, oh yeah, 200 years ago, something with the fishmen and like Iron Giant climbing the wall. Yeah, let's just like change around history a little bit there. No one needs to know about that, right? Even Robin, who knows a lot about history, she's an archaeologist and all that stuff. When they learned about Emmett's attack on Marijois, she didn't really know about that, which would make sense. I mean, the government would definitely cover that up. But Robin is like, oh, around 200 years ago, that was right around the time that like fishmen were given like basic human rights. That's interesting that's like a parallel there. Okay, so not really sure what happened there, but maybe Jarl can enlighten us. 300 years ago is when the Germa ruled the North Blue. I don't know if that has anything to do with Jarl, but 300 years ago, that was what was going on in the One Piece world. They were the Germa Double Six, Kingdom of Evil, ruling over the North for 66 days, and then something happened and they lost their rule. Maybe they fell under their own, hubris, or maybe the world government got involved back then and the Marines waged war on them or something, but they ruled for 66 days, and then here we are 300 years later when Judge wants to, like, revive the Germa to their glory, okay? So, yeah, at that point, he would have been 108 years old. That's roughly around the age of Saul's a little bit older than that now, but like back during like O'Hara, he was I think around 100 or something like that. So he was a vice admiral at that time. So Jarl would have definitely been very hardy back then. Okay, and then after that, because once we know a lot about One Piece in like the last like 30, 40, 50 years, but once we start going back through the timeline, it's like, 200 years ago, we know some stuff. 300 years ago, we know like one thing. The centuries as they go further back, we don't know as many things on the timeline that Oda's mentioned, but 400 years ago, and this is when Jarl would have only been a little kid, right? He would have only been like 8 years old or something like that. And keep in mind, these dates are always approximates. So we don't know like the exact date. Well, I think we actually do know the exact date. Like, I think it's like the year 1100 or something when Noland was making his adventures, around Jaya, discovering Shandora, meeting Kalgara, and then the knock-up stream, knocking Jaya into the sky, and then Noland was executed, all that kind of stuff happened. That was around 400 years ago. I don't think we got an exact date for that. Like, it was 417 years ago exactly that Noland was executed. We don't get anything like that. It's just like around 400 years ago is when all the stuff with Noland occurred, okay? Whether that have been slightly before or slightly after Jarl was born, it's kind of a moot point because he was a child and would have probably have been living on Elbaf and would not have known anything about happening in the outside world, okay? But I would say the one thing that's the most interesting, and since we're just coming out of Egghead and we learned a lot about Emmett, the Iron Giant and all that, and we specifically mentioned that, like Robin brought up the whole thing with Fishman Island 200 years ago. Here's a man that lived through it. He was an adult when all that happened. He would have had memories of it. Maybe he was even involved in some way. Maybe the giant warrior pirates back 200-something years ago played a role in this, or at least were around to remember it, okay? So there you go. You got to keep in mind. You also got to keep in mind, because giants live so long, and we don't know exactly when they start to have kids. I mean, we were kind of debating that in the last chapter. Like Ripley is probably around the same generation as Dorian Broggy, so she would maybe be around, I don't know, 150, 160 years old right now. We don't exactly know when Colin was born or anything like that, but I would assume maybe around post-age 100 is when giants maybe start thinking about time to settle down and have children and have the nice house in the suburbs with the white picket fence and a golden retriever. Maybe it's after 100 you want to maybe settle down, or you're just going to stay being a warrior like Dorian Broggy did. Because remember, Elbaf is very much a warfaring culture. It is the warland, after all. But not all giants are going to subscribe to that. Some giants that live on the warland want to be part of the giant warrior pirates, or Hyrudin wants to go out and make his new giant warrior pirates. Some will leave Elbaf for a different life. Some will settle on other islands, like Saul was from the South Blue. Some will go join the Marines, like LaCroix, or forced into the Marines, I guess, like John Giant was, by Mother Caramel and everything. So, giants have different life, styles and everything they do and all that stuff, right? But the point is, growing up 400-something years ago, when Jarl was a child, his father, let's say, would have been maybe 100 to 150 years old when he was a little kid, right? So that means his father would have been around easily over 500 years ago, maybe even 600 years prior to the start of the story. And then Jarl's grandfather would have been, once again, maybe 700, 800 years back. So really, we only got to start getting into, grandfather, great-grandfather. I think it's pretty fair to say Jarl's great-grandfather could have lived during the Void Century. That's not that crazy. Now, also keep in mind, not every giant is going to live as long as Jarl, and you're not going to have children when you're, super, super old, right? What are you, John Tyler or something? Look into it, 10th president of the United States. Anyway, so Jarl lived to be 408. That doesn't mean his dad lived to be 380, and that's when Jarl was born, right? Or his grandfather lived to be 400, and that's when Jarl's father was born, or something like that. No, further back in the, you're not waiting until your advanced age to have children, unless you're John Tyler. But the idea is that the memory would have only been 2-3 generations back. So passing it down as an oral tradition throughout the giants would have been way more retained. All right, because you look at the generations of humans. I don't even want to begin to how to calculate let's say in our world, my ancestor from 850 years ago, which in One Piece would have been right dead center in the middle of the Void Century. How many generations back would that have been for me? My dad was born in 1958. I was born in 1993. My grandfather was born in 1934. My great-grandfather was born in 1905-ish, somewhere around there. And that's already great-grandfather. We're not even into the 1800s yet. You know what I mean? So, I don't know, great times, 20-something, 30-something grandfathers back is when we hit, for my generation, so any information from my past, my ancestors fighting in Scotland, back in the day, I don't have any, memories or anything passed down from, oh, yes, the story about your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather teching. It's right? Okay, yeah, no, nothing, right? So Jarl, though, could sit down with the Straw Hats and be like, oh, the Void Century, you say? What was that? 800? Maybe, you know what? It might not even be a Void Century to the Giants. I mean, they might call it that because that's what, the world calls it that. The scholars at O'Hara called that, and, Saul called it that. They're not really much into, book learning before Saul came along with all of the knowledge from O'Hara and all the books and everything like that. But they would have a very strong religion and very strong traditions of that, just passing down stories. So maybe Jarl would be Void Century? When was that? Like 800 years ago? Well, I don't know anything about void centuries and road poneglyphs and ancient kingdoms or anything, but my great-grandpappy did tell me a story when I was growing up. And then he tells a story, and it might be nothing crazy. It might not be a super relevant story like we learn everything about the Void Century, but we gotta start learning at least a breadcrumb trail of things from the Void Century, because then when Robin finally finds all of the Rio poneglyphs at Laughdale, or when like they're all assembled or whatever, and the history clicks together, and Robin can finally be like, everybody, here is the story of Joy Boy and the Void Century, and everybody grabs popcorn and be like, oh, it's here we go. Let's rock and roll with this 50-chapter Void Century flashback. Lock in. Like when that finally happens, I want to know at least a little bit of a story. So maybe Jarl can tell a story that was passed down in his family. His great-grandfather told his grandpappy, and then his grandpappy told his daddy, and then he has it now. And the story is maybe not perfect, just like a lot of oral traditions that are passed down. There might be holes and stuff be broken up. Maybe they threw some other stuff in there to kind of fill the gaps or whatever. It might not be 100% accurate, and with his advanced age, he might not remember everything. So it might be like, oh, let me tell you this story. So there was a guy that my great-grandfather knew. His name was Joy Boy, and he was on his crew. And I believe he wielded a giant spear. No? Was it a sword? Spear? Maybe it was a halberd. I don't care for halberds myself. I like birds, though. This is just Jarl, like meandering off the topic as an old man. Like, I like birds. Just like, okay, back of the topic. What's that? What's that now? Oh, right. Joy Boy. Yeah. Well, the way my great-grandpappy told it, life was simpler back then. I'm like, God damn it. Actually, no, it was more complicated. There was more advanced technology. Yeah, but we did things a little bit slower back in the day. When we went into a town and murdered a bunch of people as pirates, back in those days, things were just more peaceable. Just like, okay, it might be hard. That could be the comedy there, trying to get him to stay on topic without like trailing off, but there could be something there rattling around in the brain. But he does have a sword running through it right now. Okay, so either that sword is a joke, and he just takes off the helmet, and it's just like one end of the sword is there. It's like a joke helmet that you can buy or whatever. He's like, just to, like make the kids laugh or something like that. Like, old man Mountain Beard's got a sword stuck in his head. Yeah, whatever. By the way, I love Jarl's laughter style. I guess we knew about it during Whole Cake Island during the flashback there, but it's bo ja 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 ja. I like that one. It's funny. Okay, so if this is real, like if he actually does have a sword through his skull, which, by the way, I'm not even that concerned with it in terms of like how this works biologically. This is the world of One Piece. If you just want to go with the idea that, somebody stabbed Jarl right through the head, but he was able to survive, but it's like, if I pull it out, I'm dead. It's like, oh, okay, I'll just leave it in there. I've seen this happen before in fiction. It's okay, all right? Like, I understand. It's all right, But what if somebody does pull the sword out at some point in this arc and Jarl dies because of that? Oh, man, that would be so sad. He's just like, I'm fine, bo ja ja ja. As long as I don't pull out this sword, doctors say I'll live another 20, 30 years. And then at some point, like, I don't know, Loki is like, I'm back, and then pulls out the sword. No! All right? So he did not have this sword impaling his cranium 60-odd years ago when Big Mom's flashback happened. To do a refresher there, Big Mom had a little bit of a hunger pang. She really wanted that semla. They didn't have any. They were going through a fast. She attacked the entire village. The whole thing almost burned down. She grabbed Lord Fallbeard, Jarl, Mountain Beard, Jarl's trusted companion and brother-in-arms for over 3 centuries at that point, and then hoisted him to the ground and cracked his skull, and that ended up killing him, right? Now, immediately after that, they shoved a bunch of semla in front of Big Mom, and she, ate a bunch of it and then passed out. And then Jarl, as like, okay, my friend is dead, and, we're giants. We are warriors of Elbaf, of the Warland. If we're gonna die in glorious combat, screaming into the fray with a sword, and all that kind of jazz, right? And Jarl was killed by a 5-year-old wearing a pink muumuu. Not very honorable of a way for a warrior to go out. So Jarl picks up his sword, and he's like, I'm ending this now. I'm ending this nightmare before it begins. And he's just about to kill Linlin. And then Mother Caramel jumps out in front of her like, hey, don't hurt her. She didn't know what she was doing. It was like some kind of like fit of rage or something. And Jarl's like, how dare you, Mother Caramel? Why would you protect her? Don't you understand? Jarl was my friend. We fought together for 300 yards. Do you know how many yards that is, Mother Caramel? And just like, I know it's a lot of yards, Jarl, but still, you can't. I need to sell Big Mom to the government to make a bunch of money. I mean, she is a child, and she is innocent in this world. And like, Jarl is like, okay, fine, just get out of my sight then. And so Mother Caramel takes all the children of the Lamb's house, Linlin included, and they leave, and they go to another island where they establish another Lamb's house, right? That was the whole story of that and all that jazz, right? So, I went back just to see if the sword that Jarl was wielding was the same sword that was impaled in his head. I don't think it is, but it's one of those things where, like, they're different. Like, I can't really get a good view of it in the manga. And even if it wasn't, I mean, Oda could have changed that around later. But, like, yeah, I'm not really sure if that's supposed to be his sword or, like, another sword got impaled there. Since he didn't have the sword 60-something years ago, and then Jarl died, I'm thinking, does it have something to do with it? Like, does it have something to do? Because I'm trying to put my perspective in Jarl's own, like, okay, your best friend died, okay? And he died in such a way that is so dishonorable of the Giants. So what if Jarl was like after the funeral and after Mother Caramel and Linlin all left and they're gone, what if Jarl was like, you know what, Jarl? You know what? You and I are best friends. Like, he's at his grave and he's talking to him and he's like, you know, we've had a lot of journeys, you and me. He's got a big giant tankard of Elbaf, like, whiskey he's drinking in front of his friend's grave, and he's like, you and me fought sea kings the size of mountains. You and me fought dragons, literal dragons. That one time you threw a rock in the sky, conked that celestial dragon on the head, and he went spiraling down. Oh, that was great, Jarl. That was great. Tell you what, I'm going to go on one last adventure. And I'm going to have an honorable death on this last adventure, and I'm going to come join you in Valhalla. But I'm going to die such an honorable death it makes up for both of us. You could see Jarl doing that. You could see Mountain Beard being like, I don't want to live without my friend. We're already pretty old. So he sets out to sea. Maybe by himself, maybe with a few other geezers from the village, just to like have one big final adventure, and then he wants to die in glorious combat, enough for both him and his friend to make up for the death of Jarl. And then he dies, and then he goes and sees his friend in the Heaven Lair, or the Valhalla, or whatever you want to call it, right? You know, they arrive in Odin's Hall and eat that eternally reproducing pig. Not reproducing as like the pig has children, as in like the pig regenerates over and over again, and they keep eating it, right? Okay? You know, something like that, right? So he sets out to sea for this epic adventure, and that's when he runs into William. Okay, maybe not, but that's where he gets the injury, right? He's trying to fight in this epic battle, and he gets stabbed in the head, and he's like, oh, this is it, Jarl. This is it. I'm coming home. Am I dead? No, Captain Jarl, you're not dead. I got stabbed in the head, didn't I? Yeah, good thing you were wearing your helmet. Oh. Do I take it out or do I leave it in? I think you should leave it in. Number one, I think that's just healthier, and number two, it looks really badass. All right. Shit, why can't I die? You know, honestly, if I was Jarl and I got stabbed that way, I'd be like, I'm immortal. I am forever. Wait, what if he is immortal? What if he... Whoa, wait a minute. He's 408 years old. He's the oldest giant. He has a sword through his head. Is this some kind of devil fruit shenanigan going on here? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Remember when Vegapunk talked about how devil fruits came about through human desire, right? Somewhere out there in the world, a human really wanted to turn into fire, so the Mera no Mi existed. Somewhere out there, a human dreamed the lost dream of becoming a jacket, and then the jacket fruit was born. You know, one of the most common human desires, I would imagine, especially in antiquity, would have been immortality. I mean, still is. There's still a lot of people that want to be immortal. I think being immortal is like the scariest. Like, you would not want that. No, dear God, no. But like, you'd think that would be something that people would dream up. Like, I want to be immortal, right? Now, you could argue the op fruit already does that, kind of. The op fruit is more about eternal youth. So when you perform the eternal youth operation, you stay that age forever. Like, you will not die of aging. You know, if you have the eternal youth operation performed on you at age 30, you stay 30 indefinitely. But I always read and interpreted that like you can still die. Like, if you had the eternal youth operation on you at age 30, you could live 100 more years. You're perfectly fine. You won't die of old age. But if someone shoots you in the head, you're still going to die, right? Like, if you suffer enough injuries, you're still going to die. What if there was a devil fruit that was focused specifically just on immortality in the sense of, like, you can't physically die. You can't die from aging. You can't die from disease. You can't die from a sword wound through the skull. You just can't die. Unless the devil fruit ability was nullified by, like, the Yami no Mi, or somebody stole the devil fruit ability, or maybe you were chained up with sea stone and then killed, or something like that. Maybe. Now, you could say that's a really OP power, but, you know, you're still, that's the thing. You don't die from aging, but you still age. That would be horrifying. That would actually be an interesting way to nerf it, where, yeah, you live to, like, the age of 1,000, but you're like a shriveled up prune. You're like that lady from that SpongeBob episode with the chocolate. Chocolate! I remember when they invented chocolate. Like, you keep aging, but you just don't die. So by the time you're 1,000, you can't do anything. You're not strong. You can't fight anymore, but you're technically still alive. Dude, that would be a horrible existence. Let's do it. Jarl went on this grand adventure, ate the immortality paramecia, got stabbed in the head, can't die, but continues to age. I don't know how that would work with the reincarnation. There would have to be a way to die. You know, like I said, maybe sea prism or drowning. Like, if you fell in the ocean, maybe that would do it. But, like, immortality paramecia. What do you think? I don't know. But it's possible it's just a gag, or, I mean, I think it's going to be a gag no matter what. Like, even if it actually is impaled on his head, it's going to be like a story behind it, but maybe that's the story. And then he came back to Elbaf after this grand adventure. He's like, well, I tried to avenge Jarl. Well, how did it go, Captain? I'm immortal now. Oh, I mean, that's good, I guess. And then he just goes into the village kind of mad he didn't die. Oh, man. Also, by the way, this was something that I think Oda is going to retcon. When we see Jarl next to Bragi in this chapter, because Bragi's, like, introducing him. Like, hey, guys, check it out. This is Elder Jarl. Bragi is, like, I think 20 meters tall or some such. Like, 21 meters tall. Jarl is, like, twice as big as him. Like, Jarl is, like, towering over Bragi, and he's, like, way more wide. So he's probably, like, at least 40 meters tall. And I think their heights were revealed in a Vivre card once, and they were inaccurate. So if this is accurate to what Oda's going to be doing, I think there's going to be a lot of scaling issues in Elbaf, just because everything has to be big, and, you know, Oda's not perfect. He's going to make mistakes sometimes. But yeah, Jarl is significantly bigger, at least double the size of Bragi in this panel. So I just wanted to bring that up there. But anyway, that's the story of Jarl there. Let me know what you think about this giant and the things he would have lived through and his grand adventures that he's probably going to sit down and at least tell the Strats a little bit about something. I mean, you have old Grandpappy Jarl here. He's got to sit down and tell them something about something. Oh, maybe it's like, yeah, maybe it's like Usopp and Luffy will be like, hey, old man, tell us a story about back in the day. And he starts telling stories. And a lot of them are not really important to the overall plot. They're just like, oh, there was this one time me and Jarul went and killed a giant sea king. You know, okay, they'll tell that story. But then as he's going through the story, he brings up something about the Void Century or something actually relevant. And then it's like, wait, go back, tell that one. That would be cool. That would be cool. Anyway, that's the video. Hope you guys enjoyed. And now, moving on to tree facts. Letter P. I decided to go basic with this. We're talking about pistachio trees today. Anybody like pistachios? My mom loves pistachios. She used to use pistachios all the damn time, like giant bags of pistachios. I personally never cared for them all that much. I'm more of an almond guy, honey roasted peanut kind of guy, but pistachios, okay. So people have been eating pistachios and farming them for a long time ago. There's evidence that supports pistachio trees and farming has been going on for about 9,000 years now, all the way back during ancient Mesopotamia. So, I mean, like well before like the Sumerians and stuff, when agriculture was just kind of get going, people were harvesting pistachios. Mostly grown around the Middle East, Iran, Afghanistan, Turkey, that general area. In the United States, California produces 99% of all the pistachios in the country. So if you want some pistachios, go to California. Let's see. They need a well-drained, sandy soil in order to grow properly. Pistachios can be used in a variety of foods, oils, good source of protein and fiber, vitamin B6. They need very long, hot summers and then a chilling period of winter. Not so cold that it's like super, super, super freezing like here in Pennsylvania, but like they need a period of like super hot summers that last a while and then a slightly cooler winter to properly reach like the maximum hardness of the shell. They're referred to as drupes. D-R-U-P-E. That's just a term for being a hard-shelled legume, I think. So I never heard of that before, a drupe. Okay. But, yeah, those are pistachio trees. Pretty cool, right? L-M-N-O-P-Q. Oh, are there any trees that start with the letter Q? Oh, this is going to be fun. All right, well, catch you back here next time, and we'll see what that with tree facts. Thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Teching, signing out.